Hello, I'm Carolyn Anderson, and this is my book, Recipes, Menus, Prayers for Family Gatherings. In this book is my favorite recipe for making pie crust. It's the pie crust that my mother taught me to make, and it's the very same pie crust that my grandmother taught my mother to make. So let's go inside and get started. Meet my cousins, Marty, Barbara, and Susan. Now I'm going to begin by showing you how simple it is to make this pie crust. It only has 4 ingredients. And I'm going to put them in, stir them up, and show you how to do it. Susan is going to tell us about what she uses for vegetable shortening.
When I make my pies, I buy Crisco sticks, and it comes usually 3 to a package, and each one is equivalent to just like 1 cup, and that's what my recipe calls for. So all I have to do is open it up and plop it in. There's no measuring, so that's why I like it. And I'm done. At this stage, you want to just work the pastry as much as possible and till it gets just kind of mealy and kind of like a cornmeal, so the flour is really worked in well. And then I think it's just about right now, but then I usually take my fingers at the very end of this and then just feel around and make sure that all the moisture is worked in.
Now Barbara, she uses the same vegetable shortening that I use, except she uses the buttery Crisco.
My shortening of choice happens to be the buttery Crisco. I like the Crisco with buttery flavor, and I've used it for many years. And my variation is slightly less than Susan's because I have put 1/3 cup of ice water in my measuring cup, and then I will put in enough buttery Crisco to bring it up to the 1 cup line. In another lifetime, when we were doing 4-H demonstrations, one of the things that we always stressed was to be sure that you do this with an eye level measure and not eyeball down from the top, which means that to get a 1 cup measure, I get on eye level with it. And interestingly enough, don't work directly over when you're doing something of this sort until such time as you want it in. It's real easy to spill more water in than you're ready to use. And as Susan was demonstrating, when you're working it in, you don't want to work it all in all at once. You take a little bit of time and work it in until you get a meal type texture. Part of the ice water is so that the shortening will not adhere or stick to the measuring cup, and the other part of it is then I'm going to end up using this ice water as the binding agent for holding this whole flour, shortening, and salt mixture together.
As you can tell, there's different ways that you can use a shortening ingredient for pie crusts. We can use Crisco. You can also use a stick of butter if you want butter. I choose lard. The reason I like lard is because my mother and my grandmother used it, and I feel it makes the pie crust much flakier. So that's why I get lard. The only problem is you may have difficulty finding it in a grocery store. You probably will have to go ask the meat manager. Sometimes it's around the meat counter, but I find it's very economical, and I love the way it makes a pie crust taste.
Making a pie crust is very easy. There really are only 4 ingredients: your flour, your vegetable shortening, your bit of salt, and your water. So let's begin. I've measured 3 cups of flour. This is just the unbleached all-purpose flour. So let's put that in the crock. It seemed right to use crocks in the Indiana farmhouse, but you can use any bowl that you have. The salt, I always measure it over something not the crock that I have my flour in, because that could pour out very quickly and easily. And I use 1/4 teaspoon for my 3 cups of flour. Sprinkle that in, and then I add my shortening. Now I'm using the white Crisco, and I've measured out 1 cup, and I'm going to just put that in to the flour. And I use just a simple fork, and I just cut that into the flour using the fork to mix it. Now, as you can see, my cousins, they are the expert pie makers, are all using a pastry blender. But if you don't have one, don't worry. Get that fork out and move that flour. There is a point, though, that I just can't stand it. I want to get involved in that mix, and that's why I've taken off any ring that I might have on, because and my hands, as Barbara points out, they need to be very clean. But I just can't wait to get in, and I play with it, and I'm moving it between my fingers, and I'm getting that worked into a state that it's into a cornmeal, and I just have fun, like the days when we were out making mud pies in the woods. But this is why I find cooking a delight. I'm not the kind of cook that has to go fast. I simply want to smell and taste and be with the foods. This is what I do to get it ready. It doesn't take long. That I'm soon going to have this into a cornmeal mixture, and that's just with my fingers. Now, as soon as it is in the cornmeal state, as this is at this point, you're ready to put your water into it. Again, I take my handy fork and I take ice water, because we all are talking about how we do want that. At this point, it doesn't matter, you can just work this and continue working this, but once you are starting to make the dough and you are adding your ice water, you're going to want to move very quickly. For the 3 cups of flour, I'm using 1/2 cup of water plus 2 tablespoons of cold water, and I always have an ice cube. You can see my ice cubes in there, so that it is definitely ice water. And I pour it in, stirring as I pour. At this point, you don't want to overwork it. You want to quickly get that water mixed in to a point that you will be able to make this into the balls that you're going to roll out. And I'm going to put my fingers back into it.
I'm doing too.
And turn that into a ball ready to roll out into a pie crust. Now, I like to let my dough rest for maybe 15 minutes. Sometimes if it's, I may put it even in the refrigerator to rest, because I like to roll it out cold. But I know that Marty doesn't rest her dough.
The dough that I've chosen to work with today is only for 2 pie crusts. So I work my dough, and then I take half of it, make it into a ball, take some flour, sprinkle it onto your medium that you're going to be rolling it out on. I happen to choose a Tupperware, which has the exact circles that you need for a tart or for a 10-inch, 8-inch, 9-inch pie. Make sure that you get enough flour on there. Place your ball in the center of the circle and start working. Roll it a little bit this way. Turn it over so you can keep the flour on it. You don't want to work a whole bunch of flour into it. Keep working this way and that way until you get your circle. I just move the flour over it smoothly. Roll it out a little more. Work it until you get to the size of the pie pan that you've chosen for your particular pie. Once I get that rolled out, I pick it up, simply pick it up, it's very pliable, flip it over in half, and then lift it gently and put it right in the middle of your pie pan, and then grab a hold of it and flip it on over, making sure that it goes down into the pan. You don't want to stretch it. You want it to fit down into the pan, or when it cooks, it will shrink. Once I get it into the pan, take a fork, go around the pan with your fork, and cut the excess pie dough off so that you can be ready to crimp the edges of your pie before you're ready to put your filling in it. Simple as that.
When I'm rolling pie crust out, I like using parchment paper, and one of the several reasons is because it's a nice wide width, and you know, it's usually close to the same size of the pie crust I want to roll out. And I don't use flour like Marty does. I just peel off the paper and set it aside, and then just kind of plop it in really this way, and then it just easily peels off of the crust. And it seems like usually I am making several pies at a time, so I reuse the papers too to make all my pies for that particular day. And parchment paper can also, you can just buy it at the grocery store.
You've heard about the various items that they use to roll their pie crust. I simply use the waxed paper. So I rolled out my dough on the waxed paper, and when I'm ready to put it into the pie plate, I fold it over. And I simply lift it on. So I think what we're really saying is the ingredients are very few, the items you need to make them are very few, and you can usually find them in your very own kitchen. Now I believe we're ready to see how you do this when you reach this point and you've pricked, you need to, which is what I would do next, is to put some little holes in. If you're just making simple and you're in a hurry, I've got the method of simply taking my finger and pushing it in on the edges. I haven't doubled over the crust, so that I'm just making a small, almost rick-rack kind of design around the edges.
So even with pie dough, when you don't want to feel like you've got anything left over, when you go around your pie pan and with your fork and have that excess dough, don't throw it out. Put it in a little ball, roll it out like you did your regular pie dough, and then you get some sugar and cinnamon. You can either get the kind that's been pre-mixed, and just a little pat of butter, roll it back out, and then you take your butter, spread a little bit of it onto the dough, evenly out, and then sprinkle it with some cinnamon and sugar. Just make it happy, as much as you want in there. Make sure you can taste it. And then simply roll it up into a little roll. Put it in a little pie pan. Make him in a little spiral. Take a knife and make little teeny slits in him. When it comes out, your kids will love you because they love your little cinnamon and sugar roll.
Hope you've all discovered that making pie crust is as easy as making pie.
Wow!